claiming to be a leader of the sects.
The background of the COVID-19
response
and its connections to contemporary lecture. Some years ago, we did develop argument that this first half of the 21st century is going to be the moment in which the reparatory justice movement takes center stage in international politics and discourse. I remain committed to the view that reparatory justice is the most globally energized movement at this time, and certainly what the COVID conversation is showing, the empirical evidence around COVID-19 and its racialized impact, is that history has come fully into the contemporary conversation about social justice in the area of public health and economic. History once again has forced its way to the center. Of course, there are always those counter-reactionary arguments that speak to the jettison of history, its marginalization in contemporary conversations, and really the fact that it's time to move on. This pandemic has aggressively and violently brought history right back into the vanguard of any conversation. The evidence is quite clear. Those countries in Africa and the Caribbean, Brazil, diaspora that have been cleaning up the colonial mess since they have become independent and are failing miserably in cleaning up that colonial mess, largely because despite the greatest efforts of leaders, despite the most noble contributions to civil society, the enormity of the legacy of slavery is so overwhelming. And in every country that I have looked at, there has been an underestimation of the legacy and its negative impact, and thus confronted with the heavy weight. In the US context, the richest nation, the materially richest nation in the world, again, the history has forced its way into the conversation, where those who have been carrying the burden of the crimes against humanity are once again at the center of the devastation, largely due, in fact, to those historical forces. We know that the pandemic of chronic diseases is ripping its way through the black world. And we know that this explosion of diabetes hypertension in the black community, primarily in the diaspora, has been historically informed and shaped. So just as we are confronting the significance of this chronic disease revolution, and in the context of the Caribbean, and this is also the same for the US South, over 50% of all the black people over the age of 50 have either diabetes or hypertension or both. So that if you use the marker of chronic diseases, the black people are the sickest people in the world, and certainly in the context of the diaspora of the Caribbean, yes, Brazil, yes, we indeed, the post-slavery community, or the post-enslaved community, is the sickest community on the planet. And it's therefore connects the history of the chronic disease pandemic now to COVID-19 pandemic. That precisely it is these sickest people, the results of a historical process, that are now the primary targets of COVID-19, which again violently connects history to the present and show the continuity of historical forces, and there ought to be no surprises in this regard. It is for this reason that some of our CARICOM leaders, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados and Prime Minister Brown of Antigua and Barbuda, have called for a new a new discussion about the global moral order. The pandemic of chronic diseases now, joined with the pandemic of COVID-19, have exposed the fact much more clearly than ever before that there is a global moral disorder, and that humanity cannot continue in the face of the persistent evidence which illustrates that the Western world, through its history and its contemporary practices, are focusing upon the destruction of the black people of this planet. We cannot ignore that evidence anymore. We cannot ignore the fact that these connections of history and contemporary relationships must be the center of a new global discussion. The Prime Ministers of CARICOM have spoken about the need for a new moral economic order in which countries such as small island developing states, those